Hello and welcome to today's webinar, Bridging the Gap. Thank you for joining us. I'm Mary Waldron, Executive Director of the Old Colony Planning Council. For those not familiar with what we call OCPC, we are the regional planning agency for most of Plymouth County and a few of our neighboring towns. We assist our 17 communities in planning for present and the future needs, utilizing our local knowledge, technical expertise, and regional collaboration. To learn more about OCPC, please visit our website, ocpcrpa.org. And you want to stay tuned because we are redoing our website and you are going to be amazed by not only our new logo that's behind me, but all the great things that we're going to be able to do to communicate with all of our communities and our stakeholders. Before we begin, I'd like to thank our panelists, Jenny, Josh, and James, for participating today, but also to the OCPC staff for coordinating, with a special shout out to Dottie Fuginetti. This webinar is in conjunction with OCPC's Comprehensive Economic Development Strategy Committee. I should say that 5 times fast. Anyway, Comprehensive Economic Development Strategy Committee. This webinar is a part of the work as well as OCPC's overall commitment to working with our communities. If you have any questions, please submit them through the Q&A button you see on your screen. And if you prefer to ask a question, please wait to the end of the presentations of our speakers, because I'm sure if you're thinking of a question, you put it in, someone else is thinking it as well. A recording of this webinar will be available in the next couple of days. With that, I'd like to turn this over to Dottie, who will serve as a moderator. So Dottie, thank you for all your work, and please begin.
Thank you, Mary, and we're really excited to have everybody here today. First, we are welcoming Josh Eichen, the Program Manager and Partnerships with the Massachusetts Broadband Institute. Some of you may remember Josh from his time with MAPC. He brings tremendous knowledge of broadband technology combined with municipal experience. We then have Jenny Miller. She's the Director of Government Affairs with the Education Superhighway. Jenny brings her vast knowledge of education technology and working through government and nonprofit partnerships. And last but not least, if you work with older adults, you probably know James Fuccione, Director of the Mass Healthy Aging Collaborative. James has been devoted to shining a light on how we look at the way we age and the tools and services that help us connect to live a healthy, safe, and productive life as we grow older. This webinar will focus on broadband infrastructure and device challenges and opportunities before us. With ARPA funding on the horizon, we want municipalities, educational institutions, businesses, healthcare agencies, and organizations that support aging to start thinking about this so they're prepared to take advantage of any funding that may help move their technology initiatives forward. So James is going to be running a little bit late. He is going to jump in. You'll see him pop in as we are speaking. We're going to start with Josh, and welcome, Josh. And if you want to share your screen and get started.
Great. Can you all see my screen? Dottie, Jenny?
Yes.
Awesome.
Yep.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Dottie. Thanks, Mary. Thanks to everybody for joining this morning. It's great to be here. I'm excited to be speaking with you all in my new capacity here at MBI about digital equity issues. For those of you who I don't know, my name is Josh Eichen. I am the Program Manager for Partnerships at the Massachusetts Broadband Institute. Mass Broadband Institute, or MBI, is the state broadband office. We are a division of the Mass Tech Collaborative, which is a quasi-governmental economic development agency. We have a lot to get through here today, so I'm going to try and go somewhat quickly. But really what I plan to hit on during this presentation is defining digital equity. I think it's a concept that folks are somewhat familiar with, but I want to put sort of a finer point on it. I'll talk about how we measure digital equity gaps at the regional scale. I'm going to give a couple quick snippets of some pilot programs that MBI is working on to sort of bridge some of those digital divide gaps. And then I'm going to give a very high-level federal funding overview, as there's a lot of funding coming into this space from both the feds and the state level. Really what I hope to achieve through this presentation this morning is establishing a shared understanding of concepts related to digital equity. Again, outlining that future state and federal broadband digital equity funding sort of landscape, and then teeing up some deep dives on some project-specific efforts that I know Jenny and James are going to get into. And I know there's a lot of people on the call today from lots of different backgrounds. And so I know I actually kind of wanted to start with this slide, which is like, whose job is it to solve the digital divide? I think, my experience what I've learned is that it's no one's full-time job to do this, but everybody has a role to play. So really ranging from, folks in planning departments who I know we've got on today, librarians, school district folks who are involved in procurement, elected officials, et cetera. There's a lot of different entities that are active in this space. And if we all kind of work together, it's really a collective impact issue. And so again, excited to see OCPC and the regional planning agencies stepping into this space and fully encourage everyone to kind of work together and collaborate on this opportunity, this issue area. So really to get started here, define digital equity. What is the definition? So I'm going to read, this definition from the National Digital Inclusion Alliance. Digital equity is a condition in which all individuals and communities have the information technology capacity needed for full participation in our society, democracy, and economy. Digital equity is necessary for civic and cultural participation, employment, lifelong learning, and access to essential services. This image to the right here is from the Detroit Community Technology Project, which is an outstanding effort in the city of Detroit to actually build community broadband networks. And I think, what I really like about this definition is that it's not just about getting people online. Digital equity is much bigger than that. It's about economic participation, civic kind of connectivity, the things that kind of happen and are enabled by technology and access to the internet. So that's really the kind of baseline that I like to use when talking about digital equity. All right, so really digging into how we kind of determine digital equity or identify whether or not it's present or if there are gaps. So in this space, they're leaning into the literature, and the many folks who have been active in this area for a number of years have identified what are kind of the three pillars or three legs of the digital access stool, which relate to connectivity, so whether or not someone has access to broadband internet they can get online, an adequate device, so whether or not they have a device to use, and literacy, the ability to use that device. Through my work at MAPC and now at MBI, I like to put a couple more sort of sub bullets around these three legs of the stool. So it's not just, does a household have a connection? Is that connection fast enough to meet the household's needs? And is it affordable? In terms of a device, is it a personal computer or a laptop? We know lots of folks have smartphones, pretty much everybody, but the smartphone is not great for doing work or accessing educational materials or even, healthcare telehealth visits. So having a personal computer or laptop is really important. And then also a router, which we'll get a bit more into in this presentation. And then literacy is quite expansive, but really includes, both using technology, but also ensuring that it works, it's functioning, and evaluating information and privacy risks online. And what are the implications of this? I'm not going to get too much into sort of why this is important. There's a wealth of literature on it. I do have this quote from the FCC, which basically says that there is demonstrated evidence between the relationship of broadband access and health outcomes. And I like to say, like, if the FCC is saying it, it must be true, because they are not known for sort of stretching out on a limb. So this is an important issue, and again, it relates to lots of other things in our society, not just access to the internet. So just really quickly, looking at Plymouth County and kind of how we might measure digital equity gaps. So that first, point, connectivity. Is broadband access available? So according to available data, about 2% of households in Plymouth County do not have access to broadband internet, literally meaning they cannot get a broadband internet subscription. This is on par with state average. About 2% of Massachusetts households cannot access broadband internet. Those are known as kind of last mile connection points, which MBI is working to sort of bridge those gaps currently. Is broadband access fast? This is a bit this is kind of where the rubber meets the road, in that are folks able to access broadband and use it at the speed that they need? So Microsoft has done a lot of work to compile data on speeds. And what we found through Microsoft data is about 20% of households in Plymouth County are not receiving broadband speed, definition of being 25 megabits per second up, 3 megabits per second download speed. So basically that 20% gap is that's a digital equity gap within the county. And then in terms of affordability, looking at census data, we see that about 10% of Plymouth County households do not have an internet subscription. So this is a bit of a different number than can they get it? Is it literally available at their household? And is it fast? So this is whether or not folks are using that available internet. And what we find when we look at internet subscriptions in comparison to income, we see that lower income folks disproportionately have lower rates of internet adoption than folks in higher income brackets. And so again, this is sort of the the digital equity gap. Making sure that internet is affordable is really critical to getting folks online. And then quickly, in terms of literacy, what I'll say here is that one, there is no standard way to assess digital literacy. The slide that I have here is actually taken from an outstanding report by the state of Hawaii, which really created this sort of continuum of points along a digital literacy scale. But really that, it's never ending. So digital literacy starts with being able to open a laptop, turn it on, get on your email, and it doesn't stop. It really depends on the individual. So, NBI, we really want to try and create systems and networks and service providers that can meet folks at different levels of the digital literacy scale and basically, help folks get to where they want to get to. And then devices, this is actually maybe the most challenging, one of the more challenging kind of, digital equity indicators to measure. What I have on the screen here are responses to a survey that was done by MAPC in the cities of Chelsea, Everett, Revere. We got about 2,500 responses, so it was a pretty good sample. And we asked folks, do people in your household always have access to a computer if they need one? About 20% said they disagree with that. So about, a fifth of households lack, device access at that level. And then we also asked whether or not that household leases their Wi-Fi router from an internet service provider. About 50% said they leased, 15% said they didn't know, which probably means that they leased it also. And only about a quarter said that they own a router. And so this is important because we know that the routers that are often provided by the ISPs, it varies depending on who your service provider is, are not always the highest quality. And so having, a personal router, a high quality Wi-Fi 6 router can actually make a difference in terms of someone's used internet speed. I have added a couple of links into this presentation, which I'm sure that Dottie and Mary will send out afterwards, just for folks who want to dig more into the data. So the NTIA has a great indicators of broadband need map, and Microsoft has this digital equity dashboard. Both of these links will take you to those websites, and you can kind of dig in to some of the different, more and more about the different indicators that are available on this topic. And then really quick in the time I have left, I want to talk a little bit about how MBI is working on this issue. So first, we are engaged in a statewide data mapping effort. And so this is basically to create a very detailed, granular fabric of building level connectivity status. So really, again, trying to find that 2% of households across the state that cannot have access to internet. So that's sort of a project that's happening now. We are working on that currently. It is going to help us participate in future federal processes that are going to come down the pipe, which I'll talk a little bit more about in a second here. And then we're also working on a number of pilot digital equity initiatives. So just really quick, a couple things that we're doing is we're working on creating free Wi-Fi within public housing and in low-income neighborhoods, which I'll dig into a little bit. And I know Jenny will talk a little bit more about. We're supporting telehealth navigators at community health centers who help folks use the internet to access healthcare. We are doing a lot around ACP outreach and enrollment, which again, I know Jenny will talk a bit about. We're working on device distribution and also improving infrastructure in libraries, which is kind of a smattering of things that MBI is currently supporting across the state right now. I want to talk just quickly about some work that we're doing in Chelsea because it is relevant, I think, for this audience. So we do have a pilot program in the city of Chelsea at the Prattville Apartments, which is a Chelsea Housing Authority property. It's 128 unit family housing development. We basically structured a partnership between the Metropolitan Area Planning Council, which is the RPA up in the Boston metro region, the city of Chelsea, and the Chelsea Housing Authority to bring, free, no barrier, no subscription Wi-Fi to this development. And again, I know Jenny's going to talk a bit about this, but this is an education superhighway model that we adopted here. And what we've done is basically created a funding structure where the city of Chelsea is able to absorb the ongoing costs associated with this Wi-Fi system in the public housing, which allows the Chelsea Housing Authority to basically operate this network with technical service provided by the Metropolitan Area Planning Council. The way it works is essentially we bring one really high-speed connection into this property and then cable it throughout the property. I know there are some procurement folks on the call today. This does require, some significant procurement muscle, a 1 gigabit enterprise symmetrical internet service via fiber built to the premise, which can be that is available to purchase off the statewide contract, ITT 72, categories 4 and 6, a network vendor and manager to configure and maintain the system. Again, on statewide contract, ITT 72, category 7, and then a cabling contractor to install the cables, actually, bring the internet to the different access points. That is a considered construction activity and has to be done in accordance with Chapter 149. So again, this is a pilot program we hope to replicate substantially across the state, but wanted to kind of elevate it here because I know that there are some folks in the call that this may be interesting for. And then also just want to quickly touch on the work that we're doing to support ACP outreach. So ACP is the Affordable Connectivity Program. It's a $30 federal subsidy for income eligible individuals. We are currently supporting 2 small pilots, one in Haverhill, one in Revere and Winthrop, small community-based organizations to basically go out and sign people up for ACP. It's a somewhat complicated 2-step process. We've had an outsized impact to date. We're really happy with the work that these 2 organizations have done. Got more than 50 households registered in sort of a 2-3 month time span. And really the way it works, we're training community members to support ACP enrollment. And then they are going out and doing targeted outreach to specific populations that include seniors, families with school-age children, and non-English speakers, where we know there are high proportions of digital equity gaps in the community. And then last but not least, just going to wrap up on the digital equity funding landscape. So as I mentioned at the top, there's a lot of sort of movement in this space in the coming years. So just to kind of give you a very high level overview, the state has legislated a $50 million digital equity fund that MBI will be administering. We hope to be launching that fund very soon. I think I've spoken with many of you about this recently. We're sort of on the precipice, and so we'll have more on this soon. But this will be sort of a non-infrastructure funding source that can do a lot of different things. Looking to the federal side, there is a component of the IIJA, the Infrastructure Investment Act, known as the Digital Equity Act, which is going to bring about $2.75 billion to digital equity program nationally. The Massachusetts allocation has not yet been determined, but it does create sort of room for lots of planning work as well as implementation of programs to support digital equity statewide. And then, the really big program that's coming down through the IIJA is the BEAD program, which is the Broadband Equity Access and Deployment Program, which is $42.45 billion nationally. Again, the Massachusetts allocation has not been finalized yet. That will be done, I think, by the end of this year. But essentially, this is, the really big, infrastructure, non-infrastructure, the kind of the works. And so MBI right now is really, we're working with our partners in the administration at UHED to create a plan to effectively, administer and deploy these funds in accordance with federal guidelines. And so, I know there's a lot more that we could dig into on this, so I'm just kind of leave it here for now, but happy to follow up at any point. And I will certainly be keeping this group and the OCPC team informed on the status of these programs as they kind of roll forward. That's what I got. So thanks very much, and I'll turn it back to Dottie.
Thank you, Josh. That is one of the great things about having speakers from Boston is they cram a lot of information in a short amount of time. So you have 15 minutes right on the dot. One of the things that jumps out to me that you were talking about is the relationship with technology and housing. So people in our area know that we have the MBTA communities happening where there really is not only an affordable housing crisis, certainly a housing crisis, but how are we thinking about this technology when we start to build and procure services for all of the housing that's going to be built along the way? So it's really, I thought that was fascinating to see Chelsea and having the municipality sponsor and subsidize some of that. And our housing authorities, those housing units are very old. The housing authorities are working with really tough budgets. How can we work together to be sure? During COVID, I think we discovered that a lot of our older people didn't have that kind of technology. And even to be able to apply for jobs or to try to apply for unemployment, you can't do that from your phone. So you really bring up a lot of interesting perspectives there. So we're going to turn this over to Jenny Miller now. She is with the Education Superhighway. And Jenny, welcome. Thank you so much for being here today.
Hey, thanks, Dottie. Can everybody see my screen okay?
Yes.
I feel like after Josh's presentation, I don't really have to say much. So thank you, Josh, for that awesome presentation. I can't say enough good things about MDI. They do such amazing work throughout the Commonwealth, and they're just really great to work with. So I'm Jenny. Firstly, I work in government affairs at Education Superhighway. We're a nonprofit nationally, and we focus on the digital divide. So we're called Education Superhighway because we focused on, before the pandemic, we focused on classroom connectivity. The good news is that by 2020, substantially all kids in the US had a high-speed internet connection in their classrooms, which is great. The bad news is that, as you all know, after the pandemic hit, home access became something that we really had to tackle, and that's what we focus on now. So I just have a few minutes today, and I'm just going to talk about how we can use the funding now that Josh mentioned that's available to close the digital divide in your communities. And Josh's presentation was an awesome tee up, because I'm actually going to go pretty deep on a couple things that he mentioned. So just stay with me. So let's talk about the digital divide. So wait, I should say something at the beginning. Any resources you see? Oh, Mary, I see a hand.
Jenny, if you could just expand on your PowerPoint so it can be the full screen.
Oh, I forgot.
That's okay.
Sorry. Thank you. Thanks. Getting too used to working from home here. I'll say really quick at the outset too, Education Superhighway is a nonprofit that's philanthropically funded. So we are completely free. So anything you see today, any partnership we do with MDI, anything, it's the data resources, implementation resources, everything is free. So put that bug in your ear if you're, a planner or something, and you think any of this might be compelling. I'd love to talk to you. So talking about the digital divide. So here's kind of scene setting. There is a large chunk of the digital divide in the US today that they don't have the internet, not because they don't have access, but because they can't afford it. Okay. We call that the affordability gap. So I'm going to go real deep on affordability. That's what we're focusing on now. That's something to the tune of 18 million households nationwide. That's a big chunk. That's 2/3 of the digital divide nationally. And I know I'm talking to a room full of digital equity advocates here, so this is probably not a surprise to anybody. However, the data show, wouldn't you know it, that Black and Latinx households are disproportionately affected by the affordability gap. This is a digital equity webinar, so given these statistics, we can't really talk about the digital divide in an equitable way unless we talk about affordability. So that's why we're going to focus on that today. But the good news is that Congress agrees that this is a problem. So Josh kind of teed this up. So I won't go super deep here, but basically there is an unprecedented level of funding right now. So there's ARPA and then there's IIJA, and it's a huge opportunity for states. And the size of the problem in Massachusetts, if you look down at the bottom, there's about 380,000 households in Mass that can't afford to connect. So it's 2022, they don't have internet at home, not because they don't have access, but just because they can't afford it. If you're curious how we get that number, it's pieced together with census data. So it's a household income capped at 75K. So the law talks about middle class affordability. And the connectivity statuses have to be one of three things. So either literally no internet, like not even a smartphone, smartphone only, which Josh teed up, and it's, that's not, we're not calling that a high-speed connection, or dial-up. And so if you have literally no connection, only a smartphone or dial-up, we're counting you in that you don't have a high-speed connection. Because again, just look at what happened in the pandemic. You've got kids doing online digital learning, you've got multiple Zoom calls, a smartphone just isn't going to cut that. So okay, so these are some high-level statistics for Massachusetts, just on two things, and I'm going to talk about so there's, Josh teed this up, there's the Affordable Connectivity Program, or ACP, as Josh mentioned. So that's a $30 a month subsidy for households on their broadband, $75 a month if you're in a tribal area, which I think there's a couple in Mass. And then we're going to talk about apartment Wi-Fi, which Josh also talked about. So right now, Massachusetts has about a 19% adoption rate. And boosting ACP adoption is huge for digital equity just because of the population that it's going to serve, right? So this slide kind of says, consider a world where Massachusetts as a state had national best practice adoption. And I believe that's 61%. I know that's high. We define national best practice by looking at the 99th percentile of all cities and places throughout the US. So in a world where Mass had that adoption rate, there would be, rather than the 200-ish thousand households that are signed up now, there would be about 636,000 households. So kind of programmatically, what we'd like to say, like, this is the goal, is the delta between this 636 and this 200, which is about 433,000 households in Mass, that we'd say, like, what a world it would be if these guys were all signed up for ACP. Okay. And there might be, I think there are state policymakers on the call, so I would be remiss if I didn't say that represents about $571 million that of federal money that's kind of being left on the table that could come into the state. And we get that from, there's 4 years left in the program, so 48 months times $30 a month times the number of people. Okay, so that's just kind of an estimate of, like, this is big money, right? So this is a really big opportunity. And of course, these folks are eligible already, and we'll talk more about what makes you eligible. Super quickly on apartment Wi-Fi. So I'll keep this super high level. So basically, in one of the programs that Josh mentions in the BEAD Act, they essentially say if an apartment building meets one of two criteria, then it's going to be eligible for a free high-speed Wi-Fi installation. Okay. When we apply those criteria to Massachusetts, we get roughly 1,100 apartment buildings that we think, could be prioritized for this. And then we can also piece together with other sorts of data, real estate data, census data, that in those apartments live about 316,000 of what we call Massachusetts' most vulnerable residents. And we say that because these are, by definition, these are low-income folks. These could be undocumented folks. What these are not are suburban dwelling families that are already probably very redundantly served by telcos already. That's not where telcos serve, is not necessarily an equitable thing. So my point is that this is going to be a hard to reach slice of the population, and therefore very important. Okay, so I want to take a few minutes just to talk about what our programs that, again, we offer for completely free might look like. And I'm going to start with the ACP side. So first, this is a really cool case study. So we did a lot of work right there in your state in both Springfield and Worcester, Massachusetts. So, excuse me. Both of these districts are CEP districts. So that stands for the Community Eligibility Provision. That's a USDA thing that basically, for low-income school districts, it says the district can provide free breakfast and lunch to all the kiddos without having to collect individual applications from families. So great. So basically, school districts, we partnered with school districts to get the word out to their families, and they were amazing. They did a ton of stuff. So they sent mailers with, general info. They sent text messages. They put info on the district, student information, website, the district website. They did social media spots. They had really amazing Facebook Watch spots that I can send you if you're interested, but I loved them. They were so good. Robocalls. And then again, finally, this last little bullet, they provided proof of their students' CEP status, because again, by definition for ACP, if a kid is in the CEP district, then the whole household is automatically eligible for ACP. So that is a great way to qualify the whole family for ACP. If you're interested, they found that the robocalls, texting, and social media outreach was the most effective. And I just want to draw your attention to the adoption rate here. I mentioned the state average is about 19%, but in Springfield and Worcester, it's 42 and 39% respectively. So again, these are all already eligible families. Just using a trusted messenger to get the word out, makes a world of difference. And just in general, if it sounds like a fairy tale, it's like, oh, it's the program. Why isn't everybody signed up for it? Well, there are reasons, right? People are rational. So we have pilots throughout the country working on ACP adoption, and we've seen again and again 3 different things. The first one is just awareness. Only 1 in 4 households seem to know about ACP if they're eligible. The second one is trust. So not just lack of trust in government programs, but also it's a recurring service of broadband you're signed up for. So if money's tight, maybe you're scared your bill is going to go up unexpectedly. That's totally reasonable and understandable. And then finally, enrollment challenges. So this is a clunky tool. This is not super user friendly. It's confusing. It's not available in many key languages. I believe it's just available in English and Spanish last I checked, which is great, but doesn't go far enough. And of all the folks who successfully complete an application start to finish, so they successfully get through, click submit, 45% of those are rejected, which is not good, right? And that's not even counting all the folks who, we know are just abandoning the process mid-application because it's so complicated. And here's an example. This is actually a father from one of those 2 districts that I talked about. So these are Massachusetts residents here. Father gets the father of a kid in one of those districts gets the alert about ACP, like, great, I'm going to sign up. So he makes an account in the national verifier system, logs in, clicks the button, said, start my application, and it takes him to the Lifeline page, which is not ACP. And so confused, he abandoned the application. And, but that's actually what he was supposed to do. So it'd be better if they could kind of coach. It's just not super user friendly, right? So there's a lot of challenges. So where I'm going with this, it seems like to boost ACP adoption, there need to be a couple things going on. First, empowering community-based organizations. Josh talked about this a bit. Look, those are the orgs that were there long before the pandemic, and they're going to be there long after. They're not some random national org saying you should do this. They're trusted messengers, and that just makes a world of difference in getting a message to a family about, hey, you're eligible for this benefit. And then secondly, it's just an enrollment help. So that's a technical piece, and it needs a technical improvement. So super quickly on the awareness and trust thing. So we do this stuff that we call local leaders work. And so this is basically a toolkit that empowers, schools, churches, libraries, the real trusted community staples to be more effective in their outreach to families about ACP. And also I mentioned we're free, and we have implementation resources. So we don't just hand over a toolkit to an already overworked community leader who has a million different things on her plate and say, bye. Like we're actually there to help with implementation. And that probably sounds great, but is a little vague. So I'm gonna put like a finer point on what this could look like. So it's not in Mass, but just south of you guys in Central Falls, Rhode Island. There is an initiative that they've called Central Falls Connect. So this is just how this looks in Central Falls. So there's going to be a press event at City Hall at the end of September, I think September 30th, that gets the word out about the ACP benefit. The key partners that we're working with there are the mayor's chief of staff, the city comms director, and then the city's director of constituent services and health. And by the way, this is just what it looks like for Central Falls. This can look a million different ways depending on the million different communities that, that we have in this country. So one detail I love about this engagement for Central Falls specifically, it turns out to be most impactful. We had materials translated to not just Spanish, but also Portuguese and Creole. So that's what's going to serve that particular community. So that's an example of just, you got to do what's important for your community. Another cool aspect is involving service providers. So Central Falls is served by Verizon and Cox. Verizon seems pretty engaged already. One of the local reps there has a strong personal connection to an org called Progreso Latino, which is one of our main community partners in Central Falls. They're amazing, like amazing. So we're really excited about that, Verizon Progreso Latino connection. Cox is somewhat engaged at this point. They're in discussions with corporate to figure out what it would look like, to partner. The plan they offer isn't quite as good as Verizon's. It's a little slower, and it also requires a separate application, but they're also, they have something coming up. So they're doing like a volunteer day where they're gonna, get the word out, and that's, great. So this community is very back to in-person. So there's a lot of foot traffic, and there are already soft launch activities that are already happening. So one, I love this. This is a salsa night. So it's a citywide event, and it couldn't happen the last 2 years because of COVID. I'm sure that sounds familiar. And it's happening this year. It's happening in a park, and there's going to be like tables, and the city will be there with flyers for ACP. There's also a restaurant week, and participating restaurants will put flyers at their restaurant. So in summary, if this sounds at all interesting to you, just contact me. My info will be on the slide. Okay, and then I also talked about a technical piece. So to help people with the enrollment thing, it just needs an enrollment fix. So we made this mobile website. It's called getacp.org. If you're following along, it's in beta right now, so that won't work. But if you go to beta.getacp.org, then you can play around with the tool and see like simplified Chinese as my language or whatever, right? You can just go through the application. It tries to, we hope, get at the pain points of the national application right now. So it tells you the easiest way to qualify, not trivial. Gives you a checklist of documents you need to you need to submit. Documentation is a big issue for ACP enrollment. And then it spits out a list of specific internet plans that are going to be free. So that's the screenshot here. And then finally, if people get stuck, we have a contact center. So it routes them to the contact center, and then it's kind of like TurboTax, but free and for ACP. So then so they can get some enrollment help. So kind of my call to action here is like, we'd love if you shared this with your community. So again, I'd love to talk after if this sounds like it could be helpful to the folks. If you're trying to boost ACP in your community, this sounds like it could be helpful. I'd love to talk more about, like, we can white label it with your city or whatever, right? So there's that. And then with my remaining time, I'm going to talk super quickly about apartment Wi-Fi. So Josh mentioned this, and he already did a good job. It just kind of underscore, why are we talking about free apartment Wi-Fi on a digital equity webinar? Especially when there's ACP, like, isn't ACP going to go the whole way? And the answer is no. ACP does a lot, but apartment Wi-Fi is going to be a good complement to ACP. And before I go any further, I'll just say quickly, what do I mean by this? So Josh explained this. It's not unlike when you and I go to a hotel. We expect there to be Wi-Fi available. That Wi-Fi is enabled by not a network engineer, but like basically access points in the hallways and outside the doors, right? Same idea here, just with apartment buildings. And I say it's a really good complement to ACP because there could be folks going through transitional housing. There could be a large community of folks who maybe they're undocumented, maybe they're afraid to put their name on a government list. And so it's just not worth the perceived risk to them. So that's like community organizing 101 is we got to meet people where they're at, right? So apartment Wi-Fi is a great way to serve a high density area. And my point here is just to get you thinking, when you're thinking about digital equity in your communities, you have to think about ACP, but that doesn't go far enough. You can also think about, apartment Wi-Fi. However, it's a little tricky so Josh touched on this a little bit. It's tricky in practice to implement. So these are building owners. These aren't technical procurement experts, as Josh mentioned. Like, this is a heavy procurement lift. Original capital expenditure is going to be tough to cover. It's not usually known to building owners that, hey, there could be federal funding for this. The economics need to make sense. The recurring costs need to be low. And then also, finally, once you get that network up and running, who's gonna run it? So these are the problems, and we're trying to address this. So these great pictures, last thing I'm going to leave you with, this is in Oakland, California, where we've rolled this out. So basically, we're piloting a grant program for apartment Wi-Fi. It follows more or less the 4-step process you see here. We're about to launch in Charlotte as well. And just to talk a little bit about what this could look like in Massachusetts. So you may have heard of Urban Edge in the Columbus Corridor project. So Urban Edge is a nonprofit developer in Boston, and they're partnering with MAPC to get a large apartment Wi-Fi network to a whole bunch of properties in the Roxbury neighborhood. And we are giving some pro bono resources to that, like service provider, relationship management, procurement support, network design, which is a big one, pricing review, and providing some RFI document templates. So just an example. That's all I got in closing. Thank you for tuning in today because as Josh mentioned at the top of his presentation, if it weren't for people like you who care about digital equity, it wouldn't be on the radar like it is. And as Josh was saying, it's not really any one person's responsibility, but it's kind of all of our collective responsibility. So, so thanks for taking the time out of your day. I know you have day jobs and it's a lot to do. Super quickly recap. So 3 things that we can help with for free. So the local leaders work in your community, like in Central Falls, the ACP enrollment wizard, and then apartment Wi-Fi consulting. This is my email. Don't be a stranger. Big thanks to Dottie and Mary for arranging this. And I can't wait to hear from James about healthy aging mass. So thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Jenny. So what I heard from my municipal perspective is free. And I think that's amazing. You know, a lot of places there's resources available, but it's really hard to access them. And with you being a great partner to our communities and community organizations, that really is going to make a difference. Public outreach is the hardest thing. We could say the same thing every day. We could post it everywhere, but we're still not able to reach all the people that need it. And the language barrier, particularly in our region, we have a very diverse region. It can sometimes be a real challenge. So thank you for highlighting that and bringing that out. So now we have James Fuccione, Director of the Massachusetts Healthy Aging Collaborative. James, we're so glad you could be here today, and going to have you jump right in. You can share your screen and we will, you know, we're going to try to have room for questions at the end. And thank you. Go ahead.
You got it. Good morning, everybody. Thank you to Mary and Dottie for, I'm just trying to share my screen right now to jump right in. Thank you to Mary and Dottie for having me. And of course, I have to go after Jenny and Josh with all of their great stats and information. And I'll try to do the same, packing a lot of information into a short amount of time to give you something you can use in your communities. So, so just jumping right in, thank you everybody for being here. Just like Jenny said, I'm James Fuccione from the Mass Healthy Aging Collaborative. We're funded primarily by the Point 32 Health Foundation, formerly known from the combination of Tufts and Harvard Pilgrim coming together to create Point 32. So our central role is to promote and support inclusive, age and dementia-friendly communities, which takes lots of different shapes and sizes, although there are a lot of different common themes across the state, and I'll talk about the movement and what we're up to. So just to start with defining what age friendly is, it's a movement that started with the World Health Organization, you know, about 15 years ago, to create, you know, standards for communities where communities could commit to listening to older people and figuring out what being age friendly meant to that city, town, region, state, etc., whatever geography you're talking about. But essentially the highlight reel is that age-friendly communities are accessible, equitable, inclusive, safe and secure and supportive, and recognize that older people play a crucial role in their communities. So relevance to this topic is that none of this we now know can happen without access to technology, devices, skill building, the affordability gap that Jenny talked a lot about. So thank you, Jenny, for taking that on. And just basically how we go about doing this is that we convene and support and partner with a statewide cross-sector network of advocates that focus on sort of the physical and social environments of any community. And so because communities, cities, towns, regions care about different things, and age-friendly and dementia-friendly means something different to everybody, this cross-sector network is basically sort of, you know, as was said by Jenny, you all have your jobs and mission statements and visions and focus areas, but everybody has a role to play in supporting older adults and healthy aging. We are all aging, and so we need to think about how we can all kind of collaborate however it makes sense and however it's appropriate. So these experts on a statewide level and communities that are currently doing the work are available to support communities just coming online, or to help different stakeholders figure out what this means and how it's relevant. So there's a framework for age-friendly, there was a framework for dementia-friendly, and in Massachusetts, because this was so incredibly confusing to everybody and people are trying to navigate and figure it all out, we combine and align the two movements and we promote one age and dementia friendly movement. What you see here, these focus areas, are a menu of options. These are sort of the frequent flyer topics that come up in any community. And we've added technology, we've added access, equity, inclusion. We've sort of played around with it and tried to make it a little more relevant to what we've seen doing this work for 5+ years in Massachusetts. But certainly since the pandemic, we didn't think we could continue without adding technology to the mix and making that sort of apparent for communities doing the work. So the state, led by the Executive Office of Elder Affairs, put together an age and dementia friendly integration toolkit, because remember, these started as different movements that we're trying to align and combine. And so there's resources around communication and technology, that focus area on this website to help sort of connect and support older adults, people living with dementia, and their caregivers with technology access opportunities. And for our part at the Healthy Aging Collaborative, if you go to our website and you click on resources, we have an always evolving webpage of digital equity resources to help connect older adults with some examples from community-based organizations, and just different ways that, you know, councils on aging and libraries and all kinds of different parts of a community have come together to recognize the importance of making sure older adults are connected, and kind of going through that and figuring it out. So there's, you know, some short case studies, there's some examples, there's some funding opportunities that sort of rotate in and out of availability, and just some other toolkits and resources that we've been collecting from all over the state, just from communities and regions doing great work. So for our part, we don't have the great up-to-date data that Jenny or Josh might have, but we have what's called the Healthy Aging Data Report, and it's a statewide snapshot, but also every community, all 351 cities and towns, have their own healthy aging data profile. So if you go to our website and you click on Data Report and you click on Community Profile, there'll be a drop-down menu, and you can pick your community, and out will come something that looks like this screenshot on the left that says Brockton in Plymouth County. And there's about 6 to 7 pages of demographic and health and wellness indicators specifically related to older adults. And you can see on the bottom there, the percentage of adults age 60 and older who used internet in the last month. So of course the data is from 2019, but it gives you at least somewhat of an idea of your community, you know, of how older adults, how many older adults, or the percentage of older adults that have been connected and using the internet. And so even though it's a few years old at this point, I just took sort of a sample pack of the OCPC region, the percentage of older adults 60 plus use internet in the last month, and you can see sort of the disparity and the difference between communities. Brockton at 53.7%. Again, this is 2019, up to sort of Easton and Stoughton at 77.9, with the state average. You can see along that line at 71.3%, again, for older adults. So again, recognizing that every community is different, has different assets, but everyone has the opportunity to think about how to loop in older adults to whatever's going on, whatever opportunities are being created and built, whether that's, you know, the sort of infrastructure and the you know, the technology, or just what Jenny was talking about, having people available to actually help older adults be connected in whatever situation it is. And I can talk a lot about that, but I know I'm time limited, so I'm just running through things here. So what we've been promoting since the beginning of the pandemic has been that technology is a cross-cutting social determinant of health. And if you're unaware of social determinants of health, it's basically the set of community factors that contribute to our health and well-being and longevity. So you see just economic stability, physical environment, food access, and all of these different things. And if you thought about technology as part of this for older adults or for anybody in the community, you kind of get a sense of, well, I think, technology access can really boost a lot of these factors and help people be, better off in terms of health and well-being. And another view of this that I have stolen and used a lot from the journal Nature is that they kind of reconfigured this and put digital literacy and access in the middle, and around the outside talked about just different ways that technology impacts social determinants. So in terms of older adults, telehealth comes up a lot, but the analogy that we make, or that I've made plenty, and I know there's some people in the Zoom room that have heard me say this a bunch of times, so apologies to you, but for everybody else, when you thought about pre-pandemic, when you thought about older adults and transportation, the solution and the knee-jerk reaction a lot of people went to was transportation to medical appointments, as if that's the only place that older adults want to go. Older adults want to go everywhere in the community, need access to everywhere in the community. And the same thing goes for technology. It's not just about medical appointments. It's about social interaction and engagement. It's about civic engagement with lots of public meetings online. People, I think Mary talked about, sort of continuing education and workforce training. There are older adults that want to volunteer and want to continue working, and they can do so. They have a lifetime of experience and can contribute a lot to communities. So why are we leaving a whole section of our population behind without accessing technology? So of course, food, transportation is mentioned. So there's an online tool called Ride Match, and if you're not aware of it, it's an online tool where you can help that helps people figure out just getting from point A to point B and what public transit is available, if it's available. And so, goes without saying that you need the internet to use that tool and many other things. So again, just circling back to a report that we were lucky to be a part of, that was supported by Tufts and conducted by an organization called FSG, just found that older adults, among the older adults disproportionately impacted during the pandemic were those with limited access or proficiency with using technology. And no matter if communities were focusing on so-called primary or secondary needs, technology was a critical part of every piece of the response. And it was a two-way street. It wasn't just about older adults or people accessing technology, accessing opportunities or whatever they wanted out there. It was about organizations and communities being able to access individuals and people and get information out and just different things going on. So, if a council on aging was closed and you couldn't pick up a newsletter or get any notices about anything, councils on aging were having grab and go meals and drive-through meals and all kinds of things and virtual opportunities that were available. And technology, for those that had it, was a good connection point to learn about that kind of stuff. But again, the flip side of this is that older adults who actually had access, or their families that had access, were able to, connect to a range of opportunities more quickly and effectively. So again, part of what we do is we help bring the knowledge and expertise of different, like Jenny and Josh and OCPC, but also all kinds of different organizations and communities that have done this work, to different communities that are thinking about doing this work, whether it's intergenerational sort of tech support using local college or high school students, libraries that lend out Wi-Fi hotspots, and whether we can get those into affordable housing, whether we can get those into councils on aging and cycle through so that the whole community is aware of and using them, or whether it's some just really amazing grant funded programs that have proven the case, including one from AgeSpan up in the Merrimack Valley. There's a lot of stuff going on in a lot of ways that this could work in different communities. So that's part of my job, is bringing that to anybody on this call or in general that's interested in doing so. and my partner in crime in the Zoom call, Molly Evans from the Executive Office of Elder Affairs, is out there somewhere, and we convene a technology learning collaborative for healthy aging, which I have dragged Josh to several times that he's good enough to speak and everything else. So, but you can see from these quotes that a lot of this has to do with social isolation and loneliness and social engagement, and people just with saying with technology, I'm not afraid to be alone because I have access to the outside world. And that ends up leading to other things that just promote, a better life and a more engaged life. Older adults that are able to connect with their family instead of just on the phone, and all day long, backing up Jenny, that we promote ACP, the Affordable Connectivity Program, and older adults are among the population that, could use a little bit of support and knowledge and awareness about this, and just talking about the value of being engaged. And, sometimes people don't know what's available. So a couple of things that we've been proud to be a part of. So there's an opportunity coming up called and you may be aware of it, the Community Compact IT Grant Program. For years, that had been a funding opportunity for cities and towns to do support any number of capital IT needs. And so Dottie knows this well, but one of my devious schemes is taking existing funding opportunities and kind of repackaging them to figure out how they could work for older adults. So what we were able to do in the last round of the Community Compact IT Grant Program was the Ludlow Council on Aging was able to purchase some devices and set up a training program for older adults. And we talked to Pittsfield about having a Wi-Fi public park between the Council on Aging, a YMCA, and I believe a church. And like Jenny, I am not a technical expert, but somehow this blossomed into, well, we have the infrastructure to do this in a downtown Wi-Fi network. And this headline's a little dramatic, talking about Pittsfield stepping into the digital age as if Pittsfield was stuck, in some past era. But anyway, this downtown Wi-Fi network is going to encompass affordable senior housing, business district, all kinds of different parts of the community coming together. So, so we just encourage cities, towns, organizations, and others to think about, the role that older adults can play as part of this. So just a few quick things, and sorry, Dottie and Mary, for taking the time, but so because older adults are involved in every part of the community, all sectors of the community should be thinking about, we believe, how to involve older adults in kind of whatever solutions are constructed. Older adults live in a variety of residential settings. Many live in intergenerational households, and there's actually a program dedicated to grandparents raising grandchildren at the state level and through the state's Elder Services Network. So in working with Jenny and schools, we think about how older adults, how the touch point of working with schools and students might be a touch point for working with older adults as well. Like I've been saying throughout these slides, skill building policies and programs can be flexible and use existing community assets. Thinking about fraud and scam awareness as part of this, just like protecting your privacy and information anywhere, doing so online as well, and recognizing that many older adults, a lot of older adults, are already proficient users of technology, and a lot of older adults feel comfortable being taught and supported by their peers. So that's also a solution. It's not just older people being supported by younger people. Older adults can support each other through this work and through this as well. So there's lots of different collaboration and funding opportunities to just connect a lot of different dots, and I'm happy to talk more about this. And again, appreciate the time and opportunity to speak to you all. And that is it for me.
Thank you, James. That's we've had so much information for an early Monday morning, and we will be sending a link to the video presentation along with the slides. So I would ask that people, when they digest this a little bit, also please share it in your network, and come back to us with any questions. If we can't answer it, we will route you to the team that can help. I'd like to just give out a shout out to the other regional planning agencies across the state. I know that we have people on this call from all over the state, and remember, go to them first. They have the real pulse of what's going on in these communities and can help you with this. We have a couple of questions in the chat that I can just make mention of. One of them is if a family is eligible for ACP, does that mean that they're eligible for separate subsidy per family member? And the answer to that is it's one subsidy per household. But if only one person in the household qualifies, the whole household is eligible. So there's no double or triple dipping on that one. Another one is, are there similar grants available for businesses within Brockton or designated areas in Brockton? Maybe a future or a past webinar. So Mary said that there is a website on that matter, and it's https://www.connectbrockton.com. So look at that. As we talked and everyone mentioned, there are going to be funding opportunities coming out for this with a lot of ARPA money. So not everything is out yet. It's not released yet. So this, we tried to get ahead of this by getting everybody on this call to start thinking about what does this mean for you and your community or your constituency, and kind of have your spidey senses aware now of what's going on and how you can take advantage of it. Be prepared, shovel ready projects, if you will, so that when the money does become available, you already have a plan on how to use it. I will put everybody's contact information in the response that we get, and just would also like to give a final shout out to our executive director, Mary Waldron, for always leading and really valuing our communities and trying to get information to them as soon as possible. And our Comprehensive Economic Development Strategy Committee, led by Mary Ellen Brett of Massasoit Community College and John Murray of Mass Hire Greater Brockton Career Center, and that staff person and my partner in crime, Joanne Zigmund and Lori Muncy from our CPED department. And we hope everybody found this valuable and enjoyable today. And Mary, let you have the last word.
No, just want to say thank you to you, Dottie. So we're lucky to have Dottie, who's also the chair of the board of the town of Easton. That brings a great perspective to what we do on a daily basis. And we look forward to working with all of you as partners, not only those that are participating as attendees, but also our legislative delegation, who is really important that we continue the support on all the different critical aspects of what we do in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. So thank you, everyone. Thank you, Dottie, and thank you again to all the attendees. You all hung in there. There was a whole bunch of folks there. So let me just see, there was anonymous. We're interested in learning about funding opportunities to help small rural towns with downtown businesses. So that may or may not be part of the of today, but again, downtown and having a fruitful connectivity to doing business, and particularly in this COVID world that we have. So thank you, everybody. And the panelists, again, another shout out. Have a great week.